In 1992, grunge music was all the rage. The biggest bands were Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains. These bands all came from the Seattle music scene. The only thing the world needed now was a movie about the Seattle grunge scene, and that movie was created by Cameron Crowe, and it was called Singles. In this video, we'll be talking about the first grunge movie soundtrack, also celebrating its 30th anniversary, and that soundtrack is the Singles soundtrack, released on June 30th, 1992. It's an interesting soundtrack. It came out at the end of June, and the movie came out at the end of September in '92. It's kind of like it was like a vehicle for like big grunge bands to release new music. Out of the four big bands mentioned, the only ones not represented here is Nirvana, and the album also had other like Seattle-based musicians and some from other parts, of course. But we had like Ann and Nancy Wilson from Heart. They had like a little band called the Love Mongers, and they did a Led Zeppelin cover song of Battle of Evermore. And I do remember this album very well. It had like a lot of long-awaited music from like Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam. And, you know, those songs would be Wood and State of Love and Trust. And, you know, Pearl Jam actually had two of them, another one called Breathe. But the standard album had 13 songs from various artists, and there was a 2017 reissue, had many other tracks. And there was a song by like that fictional band in a movie called Citizen Dick. I think like Matt Dillon was like the leader of that band. And that song was actually composed of members of Pearl Jam. So let's talk about the song. The album opener is Wood by Alice in Chains. This was a very like long-awaited song by Alice in Chains, because at this time, they only had one album out. Dirt did not come out until about like 3 months later. So a lot of fans were anxious to get some new music from this band. You know, I remember this well. I was actually one of them. Now, it's classic Alice in Chains. It has Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell doing vocals, and the bass line is just a very memorable part of the song. This is just an iconic album opener. Then there is Breathe by Pearl Jam. This was also new music by Pearl Jam. You know, they only had one album released at this time as well. It's a classic grungy type of song, not to be confused with Just Breathe from Backspacer. And the song would later appear on their Greatest Hits album. It's a good song. It's just very grungy. It's grungy rock, that's all it is. Then Seasons by Chris Cornell. This is the song that started his solo career, because after this he would eventually like release a few solo albums like in the 90s into the 2000s. At this time, we only knew him from Soundgarden and Temple of the Dog. This is like a soft acoustic song. It's a little psychedelic. It's grungy. Shows off his singer-songwriter side, because at the time, Soundgarden was not doing ballads and they were doing heavier stuff, and this is more of like a Led Zeppelin style of song. Then there's Dyslexic Heart by Paul Westerberg. He is from the band The Replacements. They were a post-punk band from the 80s. And I always like confused them for the band that like sang the Friends theme song, but that was actually the Rembrandts. But anyway, this is like upbeat. It's like indie rock. It's catchy. It has that chorus like na 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 na, something like that. I'm probably singing it wrong, but anyway. Track 5, The Battle of Evermore by the Love Mongers, Ann and Nancy Wilson. It was recorded live, very faithful to the original. You know, the female vocals really work well on the song, because, you know, she sings it. She sounds a lot like Robert Plant. And it's a good cover because, you know, this is the only Led Zeppelin song that was a duet. So anyway, then there's Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns by Mother Love Bone. Now, Mother Love Bone, they have kind of like a tragic story. They were like one of the first grunge bands. Their singer, Andrew Wood, died right before the release of this album. So they only released one album. A band, they probably would have been a lot bigger. It's just a classic grunge sound that has that soft piano intro, and lyrics are very thought-provoking. Now, there were members of this band that would eventually like form Temple of the Dog and later Pearl Jam. And I think it was Matt Cameron and Stone Gossard, if I'm not mistaken. Then Birth Ritual from Soundgarden. This is new Soundgarden music, another band that, you know, their last album was Bad Motorfinger. So fans were anxious for new music. Very heavy song. You know, they played it live on their Telephantasm live album. And it's just a classic Soundgarden. It has a sound similar to like their older sound, like that Loud Love or Bad Motorfinger days. And Chris Cornell really shows off his higher range in the song. Track 8, State of Love and Trust by Pearl Jam. This was the Pearl Jam song I remember very well. I think they released this one as a single. It got some airplay, and this is the first time we're hearing like new music from Pearl Jam. Really great song, upbeat, has the distorted and grungy power chords, almost kind of like a little punk rockish, and just the recording is very, very raw. It almost sounds like a live recording. Then Overblown by Mudhoney. Now Mudhoney was a band, they were kind of like more of a Nirvana type of band, kind of like a punk rock sound. It's just a fast, raw sound. The guitars are grungy. It's like a garage rock sound, and they got some like feedback on the guitars. So if you like those like Nirvana type of bands, check out Mudhoney. Then another song by Paul Westerberg called Waiting for Somebody. Second song by him, very poppy song. It reminds me of Weezer actually, and I know Weezer wasn't around at the time, but he was part of the 80s post-punk scene. Track 11, something different, May This Be Love by Jimi Hendrix. Kind of interesting, they included him. He was an original Seattle musician, but from a very different generation. This is one of more like psychedelic songs. Jimmy was kind of like one of the forefathers of the whole scene, just, metal, grunge, like everything. And when you listen to songs recorded in the 60s and 70s, they have a really crisp and clean sound. You put on the headphones and you can hear like the drums going back and forth between the channels. That's what's really great about old music. A lot of the new music now, it's a lot more like compressed, but these old Jimi Hendrix songs, these are awesome. And track number 12, Nearly Lost You by the Screaming Trees. They were another up-and-coming grunge band. They were kind of like, could have been like the next Pearl Jam, but they eventually were like one-hit wonders. I remember I bought this album and I didn't really like it that much. It was just that one song I liked, Nearly Lost You. And that's it. It's just a classic grunge band, more like along the lines of like Pearl Jam. And the last band is Smashing Pumpkins with Drown. Kind of interesting they included this band. They were actually not a Seattle band. They're from Chicago, I believe. And this is actually before their big breakout album, Siamese Dream. This hadn't come out yet. They had one album out called Gish. It's a mellow grunge song, really great guitar tone. This band always had really great and distinguishable guitar tone. And one of my favorites bands back then, I actually liked only their older stuff. I can't really get into their newer albums. Like the one from 2020, I didn't really like that one at all. But anyway, in conclusion, this is just a great starter pack. If you're somebody who wasn't into grunge, or you're young and you were like too young to live through that time period, this is just a great grunge music and alternative starter pack. It just, grunge was all over at the time. You couldn't escape it, and just this was a great like compilation. And definitely check it out if you're interested in grunge music and 90s alternative. So up next, one more anniversary, Kiss's Love Gun. And I'm going to do it in the form of like an album versus album. I think this album would do very well. I'm going to pit it up against Destroyer. So Love Gun versus Destroyer, I think that would be pretty cool. And then weekends coming up, new releases, Municipal Waste, and a couple others. And thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.